So you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to the Superb Owl special. We were supposed to have guests. We might still have a guest. Jackson Wheat is unfortunately not feeling very well, but he did send an owl fact, so we're gonna have an owl fact, so that's always great. And today the plan of attack is basically we're gonna do a couple things. First, we're gonna give a couple, or maybe three, I guess, owl facts. So that is to tie this into the owl aspect, because if I'm being honest, the big reason this stream is named the Superb Owl Special is because it's a pun, and it's one that Beethoven suggested. So let's see. First, we in fact have a owl fact from Beethoven. Not all owls hoot. Barn owls make hissing sounds. Eastern screech owl whinnies like a horse, and the saw-whet owl sounds like, well, an old whetstone sharpening a saw, hence the name. I'm going to be going with the fact that most, if not all, owls actually have the openings for their ears set to different heights on their head, which allows them to more effectively triangulate the origin of sound in any direction, which is pretty cool. As for Jackson Wheat, you might be unsurprised to find that he, in fact, has a paleontologically related owl fact. He says that Italy has fossils of giant owls named Tytogigantea, that's Tytogigantea. And for €5, Zach Branigan says, I don't know what all this fuss is about birds. I don't know what all this fuss is about birds. They ain't real. Yeah, well, we all know that birds aren't real. They were replaced by robots, I believe, in like the 60s? I'm not sure. I have to brush up on my birds aren't real thing. So the bigger reason we're here is because, for some reason, and I don't really know why, young Earth creationists insist on taking... Now, this is not all of them. There are many who aren't taking this. We'll shout them out in a bit. But the majority of them, especially the big organizations, insist on taking the absolute dumbest stance on birds that is imaginable, given the current evidence. And there's really no good reason for it, right? So we're gonna get into that, and we are going to show that by having an article from AIG, which let's see what we can do here. Let me figure out how my streaming software works here. Here we go. Okay, so this is the latest in a series of articles about what AIG is calling young Earth evolution. We're going to talk about what that is. So, young Earth evolution is what AIG is calling it, basically when other young Earth creationists decide to be somewhat less stupid than they are. So, what's happening is they are complaining that some young Earth creationists, and in this group they're putting people like Paleologos, Todd Wood, Matthew McLean, Kurt Wise, despite the fact that both Todd Wood and Kurt Wise have directly worked for Answers in Genesis before, although I don't think as employees. I think it was on a like a contractual basis. But anyway, they are, all of them, in this young Earth evolution camp. Now, if you've been keeping up with Dr. Joel Duff's videos, you're familiar with this. And if you haven't, go and subscribe to Joel Duff. He's got great stuff. He was recently shouted out by Professor Dave Explains. He's got really good content. It's usually long form, and by long form I mean like anywhere from like a half an hour to like an hour and a half or so. Is pretty typical. So, there you go. I'm gonna slightly adjust this chat window because it is cutting off a few things here and there. Okay. Sorry about that. So the idea is that these so-called young Earth evolutionists are importing ideas from evolutionary biology. And according to AIG, the only reason that they take the stance they're taking is because they're taking ideas that are only believed because of evolutionary assumptions. So for instance, Kurt Wise has said that while he doesn't know how many kinds of, quote, cetacean there are, they actually might all constitute one kind, and they might constitute that kind together with animals like Ambulocetus or various other things like Dorudon and these other sort of like Protocetids and Ambulocetids, things like that, including fully terrestrial animals like, Indohyus and things like that. So that apparently, according to AIG, is just a bridge too far. You can have an ancestral dog evolve into a wolf and into a maned wolf and into a fox and into a dhole and all that. But you can't have Indohyus turn into a whale. That's just too much. Why is never really explained. They don't actually talk about why it is that God couldn't have somehow shoved all that genetic information in, since it's already impossible that God would shove all that information that is in current canids into one pair of dogs anyway. I mean, it's not less of a miracle. So they don't really explain why, but they're just like, nope, that's too much evolution. Even though their own horse kind exhibit that they have in the model horses on the Ark are themselves, three-toed, tiny, fox-sized critters that you wouldn't really recognize as a horse unless you were an expert in artiodactyl comparative anatomy, which, spoiler alert, not many people are. So, they've done, I think this is their third or fourth article in this series. And the first one was sort of an overview of what we're talking about. The next one was sort of a hit piece on Todd Wood. Basically, what I would say misrepresenting his views on why he's a Christian and whether or not there's evidence for Christianity. Now, I'm not going to get into his, evidence for Christianity and exactly what he thinks about that, but I will suffice it to say that I do not think that they fairly represented Todd Wood. Now, I'm not in contact with Dr. Todd Wood, but I am in contact with Peter from Paleologos, who's worked with him, and he also agrees with me that this was more or less just a hit piece and was deeply dishonest. But here, we have, as you can see on screen, a video, Why Birds Are Not Dinosaurs and Why It Matters. Now, this is because certain creationists, including, as far as I know, Todd Wood and Matthew McLean, have said that, yeah, we can call birds a kind of dinosaur. It's fine. They fit into Dinosauria in the same way that, say, bats fit into mammals, even though people used to think of them as birds. Or the way that whales fit in with mammals also, even though people used to think of them as fish. Or also the way that things like ichthyosaurs fit into reptiles, even though people used to think of them, again, as fish. Birds are just a weird flying version of dinosaurs. Just like bats are a weird flying version of mammals. And they're saying that it doesn't indicate a common ancestry. Because you got to remember that creationists accept the existence of taxa above the quote-unquote kind, which, they never really well define. But they recognize that there are these nested hierarchies that do exist. So there's a thing called the mammals. You can usually fairly unambiguously tell when something's a mammal or not. So, now, they are right about one thing. It wasn't until evolutionary biologists and paleontologists who, did accept evolution, started digging around for the ancestry of birds that the bird-dinosaur connection was made. So, the fact that birds are in fact dinosaurs and that we have transitional fossils between the two groups, non-avian and avian dinosaurs, the reason we have that evidence is entirely because of evolutionary biology. However, that's also the case for things like the whale evolution sequence. So, I don't know. This article is sort of a lay-level follow-up that is being written to the Gabriella Haynes article that we went over a while back with Vishanti. And also, Too Young to Feel This Old has gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Jacob Maston, C.G. Cruitt, Mary the Night Owl, Daniel Bressler, there we go, almost forgot the L, and Ricky B were all gifted channel memberships. So please get your tetrapod emojis in there. Okay, so if you want to see the in-depth look that Vishanti and I did to the Gabriella Haynes paper, where we went, not quite line by line, but pretty close, and we took it apart in pretty thorough detail, do check that out. It is on the channel. It's in the Dapper Reacts series. Savage Cobra for $10 says, AIG, it is said, is a selection of superfluous to society of semi-smooth sin sausages and such like stuffed into a sack, seeking to subvert science by spreading Stupendous sums of shoddy steer spore. Wow, shoddy steer spore is not what I was expecting in there. That's pretty darn good. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and take a look at this article. This was published just 2 days ago on February 10th, 2023. These articles are not being ascribed an author. There was speculation that the author of this is in fact Gabriella Haynes. I don't believe that is the case, in part because there are aspects of this writing that do not come across as someone who is English as a second language. Not that Gabriella Haynes is particularly bad at English. She's actually not. She's certainly far, far better at English than I am at, say, Brazilian Portuguese, which is her first language. But there are certain aspects of this, and I'll mention them when we get to them, that really strike me as someone who not only has English as a first language, but also kind of likes to show off their English skills, which I do not think is the case for Gabriella Haynes. And in case people don't know, Dr. Haynes is the sort of resident paleontologist. She got her PhD in Brazil. I don't remember the name of the school, although it is an accredited school. Her dissertation was on the preservation of insects, especially their wings. And she basically went through a catalog of fossils that were in a museum and assigned them to various taxa. And I believe she named at least a few new taxa in doing so. So her specialty was in invertebrate paleontology, specifically insects. So I will take a sip of my, I'm having cider today, and then we will go ahead and see what we got here. One of the primary points of contention between us, as AIG, and young Earth evolution is the question of whether birds are dinosaurs. Many within what we call young Earth evolution, the young Earth evolution subcommunity of young Earth creationist camp, have made the claim that dinosaurs had feathers and or that modern birds are dinosaurs in some sense. Okay, so really this comes down to are birds dinosaurs in some sense, right? Oh, and Zach Branigan has joined the channel at the level of Amnio. Thank you very much, Zach Branigan. Please, everybody, get your tetrapod emojis in the chat to welcome Zach Branigan. Okay, so because the thing is, if birds are dinosaurs in the taxonomic sense, which is consistent with young Earth creationism, then you could say, well, there's an even wider group of dinosaurs that happen to have feathers. And you can just give that a name if you want to, or if you think that, you know, feathers are just sort of ubiquitous to Dinosauria, you can just go with that concept. But one of the things is, you'll find that what the AIG crowd and their like-minded organizations, which in this case would include the other two big ones, Creation Ministries International and Institute for Creation Research, will both do is they will fail to ever define dinosaur in a way that actually allows us to tell whether or not an animal is a dinosaur or not. Instead, what they'll do is they'll just pick at particular aspects of bird anatomy and say that because birds are unique in having these aspects of bird anatomy, which is true, that therefore they are not dinosaurs, which is not true. It's just like saying, oh, well, you know, bats have this fabulous wing membrane full of all these sensory neurons and whatnot, and they have these powerful flight muscle attachments, and they have these gripping feet that they use to hang upside down, and other mammals don't do that. Which, as if you take bats out of mammals, then yeah, that's true, I guess. Great. So we'll continue on. But is this claim valid? We submit that no feathered dinosaurs have been found, and that dinosaurs and birds represent distinct groups and do not and cannot overlap. So, I mean, this is just wrong on the face of it, right? So, outside of birds, we have evidence of a great many animals having feathers. For instance, Velociraptor, which AIG still likes to portray in their museum as a scaly, Jurassic Park monster, had ulnar quill knobs. They were regularly spaced little knobs on the ulna that attach to the feathers. Not directly. They actually attach, if I remember correctly, ligaments that help control the feathers via muscles. Because, as you might know, primary and secondary feathers, sorry, these are secondaries, not primary. I think I said primaries. They can be moved by birds and presumably dromaeosaurids. And yeah, Nestling 20 points out that saying we submit that no feathered dinosaurs have been found. Translation: we submit a catch-22 such that anything that has feathers is a bird and not a dinosaur. But to do that, they have to then just lie about certain dinosaurs. So, for instance, we also know from a lot of things like what is it? Oviraptorids or Oviraptorosaurs, to get the somewhat broader group that also includes, like Anzu and Psittipati, that they were feathered as a result of behavioral indications, where they would brood in ways that don't make sense unless you have feathers that can retain heat projecting off of the sort of the ulna and the probably digit 2, which is where the primaries attach in modern birds, is digit 2. So, I mean, we have excellent evidence of this. And if you go outside of just, pennaceous feathers like we expect, we have, Microraptor, which is in the same family as Velociraptor. It's as much like Velociraptor as a wolf is like a dog. We also have things like Anchiornis, which is even further away from birds, and it has beautifully preserved plumage, complete with color information. We can tell that it had a rufous crest. We can tell that its feathers were mostly black, but there was a little white bit on the flight feathers and the tail fan. So, yeah. And Steve Austin says, think how scary a flying raptor would be. It would be terrifying, although chances are that even Microraptor, which is probably the best air-capable dromaeosaur that we have, was either a very weak flyer or was probably just a glider. So, and then getting out of, like I said, the full-bore veined pennaceous feathers, we can get into wider groupings where we have more pennaceous or downy feathers in animals like Eutyrannus, or even bristle-like feathers in animals like ceratopsids, well as some ornithopods, like some heterodontosaurids, things like that. So, there's a lot of evidence of feathers in dinosaurs. So let's take a look. Among those most prominently saying that, in some sense, birds are dinosaurs, is Dr. Matt McLean, who actually we're covering on Matt with Maddie, which should be not next Tuesday, but the one after. Let's see. Dr. Gabriella Haynes, Answers in Genesis on-staff paleontologist, wrote an excellent response to some of Dr. McLean's arguments last year. So we're going to double check, but I'm pretty sure that is in fact the Yeah, so actually I didn't technically cover this particular article. I recognize that it's not showing up for you, but it's an article called Dinosaurs and Birds Clothing. I didn't actually address it because it was more than covered by me addressing Dr. Gabriella Haynes' quote-unquote peer-reviewed article. Yeah. Unlike many of his colleagues in the young Earth evolution community, Dr. McLean has gone so far as to say that birds can be considered dinosaurs. I mean, I don't see why that's a problem for young Earth creationism. I mean, obviously, the entirety of the nested hierarchy of life on its own, per se, is a problem for young Earth creation. It doesn't make any sense under young Earth creation. But given that creationists have been able to accommodate it, I don't see why this is a bridge too far. So this is a quote, presumably from, Dr. McLean. Similarly, we can recognize birds as very similar to dinosaurs. In fact, we could even say birds are a type of dinosaur without implying their evolution. Yeah, just like you do with whales being mammals, and still not, in your mind at least, implying evolution. We're just saying that birds are more similar to dinosaurs than they are to any other creatures. Well, what I would like to see then is for Answers in Genesis to come up with a competing hypothesis to say, okay, well, we actually think that birds are more similar to this other group than they are to dinosaurs. And technically, even if we say that birds are more similar to dinosaurs than they are to any other creatures, you could also go with that as being birds and dinosaurs are sister groups. So, I mean, you could do that too. I think that Dr. McLean is probably too well informed to go with that. But Taylor Italian, who's been a member for 7 months and is an amniote member, says the whole young Earth evolution situation is just the most perfect example of picking up the goalposts and running down the field with them. And a Godzilla emoji. Thank you very much. And yeah, I do tend to agree. The whole thing's ridiculous. While he is careful to say that he does not mean that birds evolved from dinosaurs, there are huge problems with this statement. The most obvious one is from Scripture itself. Okay. I'm pretty sure that means I read this the day it came out and I haven't read it since, so I don't remember exactly how this. I remember correctly, they're going to get into the which day were things created on. It's one of the most bafflingly dumb arguments to me, because even internally in the logic of young Earth creationism, who cares what day certain things were created? It does not map well onto the taxonomy that even young Earth creationists use. And I know that they use this taxonomy because when you go to the Ark Encounter and they show you their kinds list, it's arranged by animal class, right? There's birds, reptiles, mammals. Those are all listed. And they even have, like in some cases, lower groups. Like they'll say clean animals or clean mammal, sorry. And you know what clean mammal just means? It just means ungulate. If you look at the description in the Bible of what clean animals are, they're cloven-hoofed animals that chew the cud. That's literally just ungulates. Those are the cloven-hoofed animals are the artiodactyls, and the ones that chew the cud are the ones that have the complex, multi-chambered stomach where they eat the raw food, let it digest a bit, vomit it back up into their mouth, chew it up again to further process it, send it to the next stomach, and so on and so forth. That's ungulates. So they even accept this group because they also have a group of extinct clean animals. So they recognize that for them, at least, what counts as quote-unquote clean isn't like the 7 or so like genera of animals that have been traditionally considered clean in like rabbinic literature. Instead, they're also including things like giraffes. So I am seeing no buffering on my end. I'm seeing a good connection. It might be on your end, Skeletor. If other people see buffering, do let me know. Okay, so redefinitions. One of the problems here is Dr. Haynes has said that people are redefining the word bird, and that we should be sticking with the traditional Linnaean classification of bird. But the problem there is that she doesn't do that. And the way I went about showing that was I just, got Systema Naturae in Latin and went through the definition of birds. And one of the things that Carolus Linnaeus says about birds that defines them is not having teeth. But AIG has birds with teeth all over the place. So, yeah. And Orson Zed said, did I miss the owl? Yes, we had some owl facts at the beginning. The name of the stream is mostly a pun, so sorry about that. Let's see. David McLean, Dr. McLean. Actual name is Matt. I don't know why I said David. Maybe I'm seeing things. Dr. McLean and his colleagues have also considered questioning the meaning of the term dinosaur and bird. Yeah, that's what science is supposed to do. That's an example of creationists attempting to do science. You need to question things. We must ask what the terms birds and dinosaurs actually mean, rather than reflexively saying that birds are or are not dinosaurs. Yes, you need to have definitions for both of these words if you want to figure out how they relate to each other, or if they do. Coop23 for $2 says, I can't believe it's the birthday of every owl. Well, yes, apparently it is. It's also, I believe, the birthday of Charles Darwin. I'm pretty sure Darwin Day is on his birthday. I think that's how that works. That approach of questioning those terms, we claim, relies on evolutionary ideas and not on the careful analysis of evidence or scripture. Well, first, I reject wholeheartedly the idea that you need to assess scripture in order to do science. In fact, I think that if you start your science that way, one, you're depending on your own ability, your own fallible ability to correctly interpret the Bible. And just the fact that, if you bring like 3 Protestants into a room and ask them to interpret a scripture, they're going to have at least 4 different opinions. Should be prima facie evidence that that is not a reliable way to go about interpreting the Bible, if you assume the Bible is authoritative in the first place. But second, science is about the evidence that exists in the natural world. It does not care at all about the Bible. And if you try to make it, you're just going to be wrong. I guess you could luck into being right. It's very unlikely. And apparently, as Cyberge Cobra has pointed out, Darwin was born on February 12th, 1809. So yes, it is in fact the birthday of Charles Darwin. Okay, and not only have young Earth evolutionist assertions borrowed the definitions of dinosaur and bird from an evolutionary perspective, but also that of the word feather. Well, the word dinosaur is defined in a few different ways. There's an anatomical definition, and then there's a evolutionary biology-based definition where there's a Clitistic definition, where when you define a clade, or Dinosauria, basically you pick 2 members of the clade and you say, this clade consists of these 2 members, their last common ancestor, and all of its descendants. Exactly which 2 dinosaurs are picked for this vary somewhat. I've seen let's see, Iguanodon and what's the other one? Megalosaurus. Yep. As 2, I've seen T-Rex and Triceratops. Well, I've seen, Tyrannosaurus Rex and Triceratops horridus. I've also seen like Iguanodon and Passer, which is the it's a bird, doesn't matter. All of those recover the same animal, so it doesn't really matter. But even if you don't go with the Clitistic definition, where you're going to say, oh, we're using evolution and its truthfulness to assess what the word dinosaur means, it has a long-standing anatomical definition. I've gone over ad nauseum on this channel, so I'm not going to currently repeat it. It might come up later, and then I'll go into it. And bird, well, we've already seen from Gabriella Haynes' paper that Answers in Genesis is perfectly willing to completely toss out traditional definitions of bird, to just toss anything they can't deny had real feathers into the bird category, no matter how little it fits the actual anatomy seen in birds. In fact, if you look at my David Menton series that I did, you'll also see that David Menton also calls many things birds that do not actually have the traits that he says are important for calling birds birds. So, I mean, either they're monumentally incompetent or they're lying. I don't see a way out of this, because they contradict themselves in their own papers and presentations when they talk about this topic. It's not that they get it wrong. It's that they get it wrong, and then also, in some cases, get it right in ways that contradict each other. So, yeah. Okay, and not only... Oh, sorry, we already read that. Consequently, we have determined that they have interpreted the evidence of the so-called feathered dinosaurs through an evolutionary perspective. Ooh. Here's one of the things I want to point out. It's a bit hypocritical for Answers in Genesis to call anyone else young Earth evolutionists. For one thing, they accept virtually all of evolution, right? So they accept natural selection. They even accept that there are beneficial mutations in some cases. Now, they lie about how often they happen and how they work, but they also accept speciation can occur. They accept that there is a at least significant degree of common ancestry among the world's modern animals. All of this is evolution. Basically, the only part of evolution that they ultimately reject is universal common ancestry. And why is that? Because if you look back at like the evolutionist, or not evolution, sorry, creationist stuff being pushed out in like the 60s and the 70s, they were not doing that. They were doing things like, oh, you can't get new species. No one's ever seen a new species come about. No one has ever seen a beneficial mutation. In many cases, they were even questioning natural selection as a mechanism of evolutionary change. And now they've abandoned all of that because it's just so blindingly obvious that even the young Earth creationists cannot maintain that those things just don't happen. And also, I mean, they've adopted absurdly fast rates of evolution just to deal with the fact that they probably don't have room on the ark if they have to bring every extant species, never mind the extinct species that they place as post-flood extinctions. So, yeah. Okay, so dinosaurs are land-dwelling animals. That's broadly true. But remember, it's also true of mammals. And yet we have aquatic mammals and flying mammals. So that means they were made on day 6 of creation, which in the Genesis 1 account is when the land animals are made. Almost all birds are flying creatures to some degree. Yeah, that's fair. And they all have wings. I mean, moas didn't, but I mean, that's like one tiny group in terms of the general diversity of birds. So, fair enough. Therefore, they most likely were all made on day 5. Well, now hold up here. That's an interesting question. Were ostriches made on day 5 or day 6? What about the moas, who don't even have wings? What about whales? Whales are part of the mammal group, and if we were to characterize mammals as a whole as being either aquatic, terrestrial, or aerial, I mean, as a whole, the answer is terrestrial, right? Most mammals are terrestrial. The average mammal is terrestrial. So, does that mean that whales were made on day 6? And that's why I think this might be one of the stupidest arguments. Because the thing is, there are land birds, there are ocean birds. I mean, what is a penguin if not an ocean bird? There are air birds, there are land mammals, there are ocean mammals, and there are air mammals. I don't understand why anyone, creationist or not, thinks that this is a good argument. Because the thing is, other than saying that God made the things that live in a particular place on a particular day, this does not actually break down exactly what was made on which day. You have to take it on a case-by-case basis. So if you come to like emus or ostriches or kiwis, then you probably say, well, that's probably a day 5 animal, or sorry, a day 6 animal. But then if you come to whales or cormorants or pterosaurs or ichthyosaurs, those are probably day 5. So yeah, and then John Smith points out, considering aquatic, terrestrial, and aerial, what about ducks? Yeah, I mean, ducks are like semi-aquatic, but also flying animals. So, I mean, yeah, that's why this whole argument always baffles me. It even baffled me when I was a creationist, right? People would say, well, this whole group was just made on day 5 or 6 or whatever. And I would think, well, I can think of members of that group that should have been made on the other day. And when I was a young Earth creationist, I just said, well, they probably were then. And then I just left it at that. I don't know why that immediately obvious response is not glaringly obvious, both to whoever wrote this, as well as anyone reading it. It just doesn't make sense to me. By saying or agreeing with the evolutionary claim that birds are dinosaurs, or are most similar to dinosaurs, Dr. McLean is mixing groups made on different days of creation. So are you guys. I'm very confident that if you ask Ken Ham what day whales were made on, he would say day 5. But Ken Ham doesn't deny that whales are mammals. He puts them under the mammal list. When he's doing mammal kinds, the whales show up under mammals. So all we're saying here, or all Dr. McLean is saying here, is that dinosaur is such a large group that you cannot say that the whole thing was made on day 6. Now, Dr. McLean believes in kinds, although, again, just like every other creationist, he just kind of defines them arbitrarily and then makes up, well, quite frankly, bullshit. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Baraminology is bullshit. He makes up some bullshit that he then runs some math on, and then he thinks that allows him to differentiate dinosaurs into quote-unquote kinds based on the nonsense idea that any discontinuity observed of a certain degree in taxa that are under consideration indicates that there's probably 2 different kinds, even though, especially when referring to fossil taxa, we should expect there to be various amounts of discontinuity. But whatever, he once again comes out to like roughly the family level. So he can say, well, okay, there's a family of dinosaurs like Dromaeosauridae, or Saltosauridae, or Ceratopsidae. And those were made on different days. Those were all made on day 6. But then other families of dinosaurs, like Psittacidae, the parrots, they were made on day 5. Or Anatidae, which is the ducks and swans and geese, right? Those were made on day 5. What's wrong with that from the creationist standpoint? The answer is nothing. The answer is basically AIG has been banging the drum that birds aren't dinosaurs for so long, they need to save face. So now the fact that even other creationists, the ones who are smarter than them, are figuring this out, basically now just has their panties all in a bunch. And they cannot unbunch them for the life of them. Okay, further he has been lumping groups that Adam would have been able to distinguish. Remember in Genesis 2 that God brought the animals to Adam to name. This implies that Adam was capable of both naming them and distinguishing between them by sight. I don't even know what we're going on about here. There is no reason why dinosaurs and birds should be considered similar unless it is presumed a priori some dinosaurs had feathers. No, that is not true. There are numerous skeletal and skeletal muscular and even like circulatory and respiratory commonalities that unite birds not just to dinosaurs, but to the wider Archosauria, including crocodilians. So, for instance, both in the structure of the sacral vertebrae connecting to the iliac bones, as well as the structure of the acetabulum, which is the hip socket. Birds are united to dinosaurs. Birds are united to dinosaurs by various details of the skull, of the spine, of the femur, of the ankle. They're developmentally linked. Both dinosaurs and both birds and various theropods have the same digit priority frame shift embryologically, where digit priority shifts from digit 3 to digit 2. It happens in both of them. I mean, there are many, many reasons beyond just feathers to connect them. In fact, I would say that it's easier to tell that birds are dinosaurs if you ignore the feathers and you just look at featherless birds and dinosaurs that you take any feathers off of. Basically, a modern ostrich just looks like an ornithomimid dinosaur that has a short tail and some fused fingers. You would be very hard pressed to tell the difference between a featherless ostrich and an ornithomimid that had a bobbed tail and like finger reduction. They're virtually identical. Now, there are some differences in the hip, especially where the pubis bone in the ostrich doesn't meet at the center line and instead sweeps very far back, whereas ornithomimid pubis bones pointed more or less down. But that is the biggest difference that you could find between those two animals after you make those little modifications that I just told you about. And also, the idea that dinosaurs had feathers is not assumed a priori. We have extensive evidence. In fact, you can find numerous widely spaced groups of dinosaurs, including, like I said, ceratopsians, ornithopods, lots of different, like tyrannosauroids, dromaeosaurs, ornithomimids, oviraptorosaurs, therizinosaurs. All of these, we have direct evidence of feathers. There is little similarity between an Allosaurus or a Stegosaurus. Sorry, there is as little similarity between an Allosaurus and a Stegosaurus, and a penguin or a cardinal. What's similarity between an Allosaurus and I don't even know what the assumption is supposed to mean. If that assumption is rejected, as it should be, there is as little similarity between an Allosaurus or Stegosaurus and a penguin. Oh, okay, so we're grouping Allosaurus and Stegosaurus and penguin and cardinal. Well, okay, first of all, we should expect there to be more similarity between a penguin and a cardinal than Allosaurus and Stegosaurus. Penguins and cardinals, even under evolutionary biology, are more closely related to each other than either is to either Allosaurus or Stegosaurus. So, I mean, that's just a thing, right? Now, among those, the Allosaurus is even more similar to the penguin and the cardinal than it is to the Stegosaurus. That's just actually a fact, right? So, they have more similar feet, they have more similar forelimbs, have a more similar thoracic cavity, they have more similar weight bearing, they have more similar tails, they have more similar skulls, Allosaurus and penguins and cardinals. So, I don't know, like, Stegosaurus has a predentary bone. Penguins and cardinals don't. Stegosaurus has weight-bearing forelimbs that, like, splay out in weird directions. Penguins and cardinals don't. Stegosaurus has palms that face somewhat back. Penguins and cardinals don't. Let's see, what are some other good ones that are fairly obvious? I mean, Stegosaurus has a different number of toes. There's that. I mean, it's just not true that you can divide these into Allosaurus and Stegosaurus obviously in one group, and then another group being penguins and cardinals. The grouping actually goes, Stegosaurus is the outgroup. Allosaurus, penguins, and cardinals make up another group. And then within that group, Allosaurus is the outgroup, and penguins and cardinals are the in-group. This fits with the scriptural implication that Adam could visually distinguish between groups. If you understand what point they're trying to make here, please let me know, because I do not get what they're even trying to get at here. I don't think anyone is going to say, including the creationists, that a cat and a dog aren't more similar to each other than either is to, say, an elephant, right? Pretty sure every single young earth creationist out there is going to say, if you have the animals, generic cat, generic dog, generic elephantid, because we're going with kinds here, that the cat and the dog are not grouped together to the exclusion of the elephant. Yet, I don't see any reason why, assuming young earth creationism, Adam couldn't tell the difference between a cat and a dog just because they're more similar to each other. than they are to elephants. And yet they all still remain mammals. I mean, and yeah, Gillianran says if he couldn't visually distinguish them, then he couldn't name them, I guess. Well, I mean, that would be true, but no one is claiming that birds are visually indistinguishable from other groups of dinosaurs. Like, that's just dumb. That's not a thing that anyone is suggesting. And yeah, Soulcat says it's AIG. I never understand what they were trying to get at. Yeah, this whole paragraph is just bafflingly stupid. It doesn't even make a point that makes any sense. John Smith says, wait, did Adam name the Dracorex Hogwartsia too? Yeah, good question. See, the only way for this to actually be, even within the framework of young Earth creationism, for this to be an argument at all, is if you had the list of names that Adam used, right? If you had a list of Adam named this group, and then a good anatomical description, and then the name Adam gave them, then that might work. But we don't. It's just said that Adam named the animals. We don't know how many names he gave. We don't know what taxonomic level he was operating. We don't even know what language it would have been, right? Because according to the young Earth creationist interpretation of how languages come about, Hebrew doesn't come about until at least after Babel, and Babel, and presumably significantly after Babel, because it's also genetically related to other languages in the broader Afro-Asiatic language family. So it's related to languages like Tuareg, Berber, the various Chadic languages, Ancient Egyptian, Arabic, Ugaritic, Akkadian, Aramaic. Did I say Arabic? I probably should have. Whatever. Arabic, I'll say it now. Tigrinya, Amharic, Sokotri. All of these are languages that are genetically related to Hebrew, demonstrably so. So this sort of diversity shouldn't have come about until after Babel, and Babel is when the whole languages are mixed up. So even if you want to say that there is a particular group of languages that are the original group, it still wouldn't have been Hebrew. It could have been like Proto-Afro-Asiatic, and then that's the original language of humanity, and then the other language families like Sino-Tibetan or Uralic or Indo-European came after and were just created de novo at the Tower of Babel. I mean, you could make that argument, but still, we don't know the names of all the animals in Proto-Afro-Asiatic. For one thing, we can't actually even recover names for animals in Proto-Afro-Asiatic that didn't exist in the area. Like, there's no word for penguin in Proto-Afro-Asiatic. Cyrus Cobra says, what do you mean, dapper dinosaur? Languages never change. That's why we can read Old English without difficulty. Look, I studied it, and I have difficulty. Amazing. Another significant problem with arguing that birds are dinosaurs is the cultural context of the claim. Look, this ties into AIG's big push to be culture warriors, and we have to be, reclaiming the culture for Christ, or at the very least, not letting our internal insular culture become too heavily influenced by the godless atheist evolutionist culture that's all about, eating babies and I don't even know, taking away guns, I guess. Maybe it now has to do with gas stoves too. I'm not sure. It's hard to keep up. While Dr. McLean may think that making the above statement does not imply evolution, which it doesn't, in fact, he's stating that that's not what he means. Look, if you say, I am not implying this thing, then it means you're not doing it. And anyone who infers that you are is doing so dishonestly. The public is inundated daily with evolutionists making the exact same claim. But that's the same claim as the claim that whales are mammals, right? Daily, well, I don't know about daily, right? Because I don't think most people actually look at documentaries or books on taxonomy daily. But the public is being bombarded with, let's just read it with whales, right? The public is inundated with evolutionists making the exact same claim that whales are mammals. Okay. Matthew Ewan says Adam spoke reformed Egyptian. Nice little dig at John Smith, the alleged prophet John. The public knows what an evolutionist means when he claims birds are dinosaurs. That birds evolved from dinosaurs. Yeah, yep, that's true. But again, let's do it with whales. The public knows what an evolutionist means when he claims whales are mammals. That whales evolved from mammals. Yes. That's exactly correct. So, why is one of those statements okay and the other one isn't? Because when real scientists say that whales are mammals, they also mean that they evolved from other mammals. And they evolved within the whole group of Mammalia. Oh yeah, that Guptu3 points out, I forgot the gay trans agenda as part of the atheist culture. Yes. You know, I've read the agenda, and it's mostly about, like, brunch and, like, being left alone and not harassed to live their lives. So it's a little weird. And there's some stuff in there about, like, you know, being treated with respect, generally speaking. It's not that much of an agenda. Although the brunch part really does sound nice. I go for a little brunch. You know what I want? I want some brunch that has, like, some nice, like, a fruit bowl on the side. Like, I want some, like, strawberries and melons and stuff. That's what I want in part of my brunch. My breakfasts lately have been very savory. To get a little bit of, like, fresh fruit in there. Anyway, when they hear Dr. McLean say it, most will understand it this way as he is making. Sorry, when they hear it, I'll start over. I need to get into the flow of reading again. When they hear Dr. McLean say it, most will understand it this way as he is making the same claim. That is, that birds evolved from dinosaurs. Although it is more palatable to Christians since it is coming from a young earth Christian. Well, basically what you're saying is that most Christians are just idiots. Most Christians can't listen to Dr. McLean say the words that he says and accept that he said the words that he said with the meaning that they generally have. So when he says, I am not implying that... Oh, thanks, motorcycle. When Dr. McLean says out loud explicitly that he is not saying that birds evolved from dinosaurs, apparently AIG thinks that most Christians are such monumental idiots, so colossally moronic, that they think that he's didn't say that. I don't know how else to interpret this. If you guys have a more charitable interpretation, let me know. But the only thing I can think of is that this means that AIG thinks that Christians on the whole are some of the stupidest people on the planet. I personally don't think that, because I know very many very intelligent Christians who are not incredibly stupid. And I also don't think the average Christian is less intelligent than the average anything else. But I don't know. I guess I read it from AIG. They're heavily implying that Christians are just morons. Further, Dr. McLean's statement represents a rhetorical device known as a mote and Bailey. Now, this is why I don't think that Dr. Haynes wrote this. The mote and Bailey analogy uses, one, words that are very archaic in English, and two, is not something that you really encounter outside of, like, English language compositions, and even then, it's a pretty old-fashioned thing. So I do not think that this is Dr. Haynes' work. Or at the very least, if most of this came from Dr. Haynes, then it was heavily edited by someone else. So the mote is the more defensible position, the one harder to criticize, and the one rhetorically retreated to when pressure comes. The Bailey is the fertile ground around the mote. So this is like, you know, like a moat of a castle. A place where ideas can be easily planted. As an example of how this works, social justice activists push critical race theory. Because, of course, if Ken Ham touches it, he's got to complain about critical race theory, no matter how relevant it is, into the public schools, which, the Bailey, by which he basically should mean at least, like, law schools. Oh, is it Mott? It might be Mott. I don't honestly remember if it's Mott. Doesn't really matter. It's not actually a word I hear spoken very often. Anyway. It's probably Mott, yeah. Yeah, and as Keller points out, like, just CRT, yeah, we're just whiplash, CRT, change of topics. Then when parents object, the activists retreat to the Mott and claim to only be teaching about racism, which... So what critical race theory is basically understanding how racial motives and race and racism have affected the actual modern outcomes in the legal system as well as economically. Modern current people living, when it refers to, like in regards to how the law has historically treated people of different races differently, which is an unarguable thing that it has, right? Oh, Mott. Okay, we'll go with Mott. And yeah, as Gupti says, critical race theory jump scare. Seriously, I feel like Ken Ham occasionally like closes the mirror in his bathroom after like getting out like a pill or a toothbrush or something, and finds critical race theory right behind him, and he jumps and he turns around and it's gone, and he's like, oh, where'd it go? Then he figures it must be in the kindergartens. Anyway, then when parents object, yeah, okay, which no one should have a problem with, which, yeah, Dr. McLean is doing something similar here. Birds are dinosaurs is the Bailey. Birds are more similar to dinosaurs than anything else is not. Unlike the social justice example, Dr. McLean is likely not doing this deliberately or maliciously. Likely. I mean, Dr. McLean, he might actually be a secret evolutionist who's trying to convince you to abandon God and eat babies and, I don't know, become trans and gay and I don't know what else. Dye your hair, I guess. He might be doing that, but he's probably not, right? Just maybe. But he might be doing that. But it is the rhetorical device in play nonetheless. It's really not, though. Again, because the only way to say that it is if you think that Christians are gigantic morons. Yeah, John Smith points out that McLean might be getting everyone to become trans, gay, and black. Oof, don't want that. Not over at the Lily White AIG. I think their least white person is actually Dr. Haynes, and yeah, she's yeah, that might be it. Everyone else is like very, very white there. Let's see. Dr. McLean's primary argument is over whether dinosaurs had feathers. Fair enough. He believes that they did, and has co-authored several papers making the claim, the most famous of which was published in 2018. In this article, Dr. McLean and his co-authors argued from statistical barometrical analysis that there were groups of dinosaurs that were feathered. Well, okay, but they also are pointing out the actual fossils, right? There are fossils of feathers attached to things that are definitively not birds. And AIG likes to just bury their heads in the sand and pretend that none of that is true. That's just not a thing. In so doing, they made some serious methodological errors and ignored the arguments of even evolutionist experts on the topic. Okay, if I click this, I feel like we're going to get Alan Fiducia. So I just middle-clicked it. And number 4 is McLean et al. Published their paper in July of 2018. In April 2018, a technical article was published on the topic was published, refuting many of the claims published in their paper. As best we can find, McLean and the young Earth evolutionist community have ignored this article. And then they link to a creation.com article, which, guys, that's CMI. Could you just link to the actual article? This is by Brian Thomas and Jonathan Sarfati, which I don't know if you know, but I've covered both of them, and they are both lying about dinosaurs. There's not a nicer way. And does this link to an actual paper? Let's see. Sarfati and Carter, which, okay, that's just... And Brian Thomas. Great. And not even in their actual... Not even in their peer-reviewed thing. This doesn't actually even link to a peer... 2 levels deep, and we're still not at even something that creationists pretend is peer-reviewed. We're just back to creation.com and Acts and Facts, which is their non-peer-reviewed, not even pretend peer-reviewed, magazine. That's just amazing. I'm not going 3 levels deep on it. If you can't get me to something that's even pretending to be peer-reviewed within the first 2 levels of links, it means you just don't have it. So I'm going to go ahead and say that they're ignoring, what we actually mean here with note 4 is that there was no such article. There was a blog post and a magazine screed. Which, yeah, I don't blame McLean for ignoring that. Now, this can be somewhat technical for some, but it needs to be stated. Oh, good. I love it when AIG pretends they're about to become technical on birds, or dinosaurs, or anything else like that. It's... Because they never are, right? Sometimes they use a few big words, but that's about it. There's never actually any significant amount of attempt to be technical. In the Feathered Dinosaur paper, Dr. McLean et al. Made an edit to the baraminology program that had never been done before. They changed a parameter, something that had never been tested, and assumed everything would be fine. While this may be true, without testing it, there's no way to know. So go test it. Go test it. You have access to the same baraminology computer programs that Dr. McLean has. Go figure out whether his edit. Don't just say, well, you know, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't. Go find out. This is the thing with a lot of creationists. They figure, oh, hey, there might be an open question here. So whatever I think should be the answer to this question is what I'm just going to go with. Just go test it. Go take your previous data sets. I know that AIG has plenty of baraminology data sets laying around. Make the modification to the baraminology analysis and run it again. Yeah, sounds like work. That's a good point. I hate how absurdly lazy this all comes across as. Like, we're getting Christians are gigantic morons, AIG is lazy as shit, and we're just lying about dinosaurs, basically. Further, in baraminological analysis, a tetrahedral-shaped MDS plot is supposed to indicate the dataset is uninformative or biased, yet multiple plots within this paper show a tetrahedral shape. By precedent in statistical baraminology, which basically just means, by the way, we did our bullshit earlier, at least these sub-datasets should have been rejected, yet they were not, which brings major problems into the results. So publish a response that isn't just on creation.com, right? Publish an actual result. Put it in your answers research journal. It's not like you don't own that journal. Andrew Stanley could rubber stamp whatever the crap you want. Just do it. It's approved now. There's literally no reason not to do that, except that you're lazy and you don't feel like you need to, because you can just say, well, we think there are methodological problems. Okay, great. Show why it's a problem. Now, it is sometimes okay to say, oh, hey, there's a methodological flaw in this paper, and just leave it at that. But that's if you actually already demonstrated that there's a correct methodology in this particular field and it wasn't followed. If you're saying that these methodological issues you have may be a problem, then go figure out if it is or not. Can you tell I really hate this article? I feel like it's pretty obvious. Goodness. Even laying aside the methodological problems, the claim that dinosaurs had feathers is extremely problematic. Is it? Okay. Not for any reason you've given, but sure. Yet Dr. McLean... Oh, and Dr. Tapioca Weasel has gifted a membership. Let's see who gets it. Thank you very much, Dr. Tapioca Weasel. I really appreciate it. Oh, and hey, what do you know? It was Gillianrin. Well, congratulations, Gillianrin. Guys, send some tetrapod emojis. Now, for all the people who've received memberships, if you have Discord, go to your Discord, perhaps after this, and link your Discord account from Discord to the YouTube account that you got the gift membership on. And that should automatically place you into the members and patrons only Discord server, which is a fun place to hang out, at least as far as I'm concerned. And in the meantime, enjoy the emojis. Let's see. Dr. McLean is sadly not the only one to make it. Even laying aside, this sentence is weird. Even laying aside the methodological problems that the claim that dinosaurs had feathers is extremely problematic, yet Dr. McLean is sadly not the only one to make it. Okay, got it. Feathers. Who else were they claiming also made it? Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen. That was fortunate. See what this is. Oh, Podwood. Got it. Yeah, the other guy that they already did a hit piece on. So this is basically just the Matt McLean hit piece. And to be fair, I think this hit piece is fairer to Dr. McLean, right? Because I don't think it has misrepresented his position the way that I think the Todd Wood hit piece. So this is really less of a hit piece and more of a whining about McLean while also really insulting their own readers. I mean, this... This is extremely insulting to Christians. I'm honestly offended on behalf of the Christians by this article. This is ridiculous. Feathers are highly complex structures. Full stop. That is not a sentence that you can just make outright. Feathers vary in their level of complexity. So for instance, let's see if we can get... Oh no, because this doesn't like me pulling up other tabs or anything, which is kind of annoying, but whatever. So here's an example. Like, if you look at cassowary feathers, or you look at the bristles on the faces of birds, they're basically just hollow filaments. But everyone calls those feathers. Everyone. Now, all of the ornithologists know that those are feathers. Because morphologically, they develop from the same little placos that feathers develop from. They have the same chemistry as feathers. They just have simpler expression patterns for the genes that create the feather. They don't have the radial splitting and whatnot. And, oh, hello, Lord Crocosquirrel. How are you? So, saying that feathers are just complex doesn't cut it. It's like saying animals are complex. And it's like, well, in some ways, but I mean, you know, there's also the sponge, which is basically just a giant pile of different cell types with no particular rhyme or reason in most cases. Also, Mike Amos has joined the channel at the tetrapod level. Guys, send in those tetrapod emojis to welcome Mike Amos to the channel memberships. Many of the so-called feathers are not feather-like at all and are best described as fibers. Now, unfortunately, that's also the case for modern feathers on modern birds that everyone, including creationists, aren't disputing. Rembrandt972 says, never confuse a placo with a thaco. Goodness. Look, there's a lot of stuff that I liked about, like, early D&D. Thaco is not one of them. Thaco, even when I was playing it, and that was just how it worked, I always thought it was a really weird and dumb system that required me to do way too much math. Okay. Even some evolutionists argue against them being feathers. Let's see what 8 is. Thiergarten, Lingam Solier, Alan Fiducia, and Xiaolin Wang. Yeah, those are all the bandits. Those people are pseudoscientists in the same way that young Earth creationists are, for just different reasons, right? Their ideas have been so thoroughly debunked that basically no one even reads their papers anymore. There's no point. They're still trying to say things like, oh, various fibers are just like collagen fibers, and people are pointing out, like, well, they're not morphologically consistent with collagen fibers, and they also have, you know, melanosomes, something that collagen doesn't have, but that feathers sure do. And they're just like, it's all probably collagen. And then in some cases, they've been called out as saying, oh, hey, that thing that you think is a collagen fiber is actually just a tool mark made by the fossil preparator. You know who called them out on that? The fossil preparator. So, like, I don't care what Lingam Soliar or Alan Fiducia have to say, because they obviously ignore data and they ignore critique, because they've just decided that birds aren't dinosaurs because they don't want them to be. But the other thing is, they also think that dinosaurs evolved from scaly reptiles. So it's not like they disagree with actual science on this point, or like they agree with young Earth creationists. So, yeah. To confuse matters more, some so-called dinosaurs have unambiguous feathers. Okay, so I guess the so-called means that they don't think they're dinosaurs, which, okay. That does not mean that dinosaurs have feathers, though, because these so-called dinosaurs not only have panaceous feathers, but also possess wing structures capable of either flight or gliding, and a tail structure like the ones found in fossil birds. For example, their anatomical structure is not at all like, say, Tyrannosaurus. Yes, please pick the least bird-like Coelurosaur that you possibly can. Is their anatomical structure much like, say, oh, I don't know, Gallimimus, or Anchiornis, or Velociraptor, or Psittacipati? Yes, it is. It's quite a lot like it. Therefore, these organisms represent extinct kinds of birds, not dinosaurs. It would be great if we had an example, right? So, like, let's go through some things that Answers in Genesis has called birds that are not birds. Or at least not birds in the classical definition of birds, the one that they pretend that they like. So they like to think that Microraptor is a bird. Microraptor's hands are just big Velociraptor hands. And by big, I mean proportionally big. Skeletally, Microraptor is so much like a dinosaur that even into the 90s, specimens of... Oh, no, sorry, not Microraptor. We're switching to Archaeopteryx here. So Archaeopteryx was another animal that has a very similar skeleton to both Velociraptor and Microraptor. It's not actually a dromaeosaur, it's actually like an avialan, which means that by broad definitions, you might call it a bird. But its skeleton is so dinosaur-like that even into the 90s, specimens of Archaeopteryx were being confused for specimens of Compsognathus. Why? Well, because they're virtually identical. So, and no, they don't have tail structure like the ones found in birds, right? They have long bony tails like dinosaurs, including Tyrannosaurus rex. And yeah, Nicholas Pulaski says, I'd like to know what they think Yi Chi is. I've never even heard a young Earth creationist beyond, in his image, Emery Moyna address Yi Chi, and he came to the conclusion that it might be a bat, which, that's batshit insane. It's so much not a bat that I didn't even know how to address that other than to say the only way you could come to the conclusion that Yi Chi is a bat is if you don't know anything about birds, dinosaurs, or bats, or just amniotes in general. Like, I don't even know. Okay. So yeah, a lot of the animals that AIG like to say are birds, like Anchiornis too, don't actually have bird-like tails. In fact, it became clear in reading Gabriella Haynes' paper on Archaeopteryx that she doesn't actually know what a picostyle is. Now, the picostyle is the last little end of a bird tail. It's made of numerous fused caudal vertebrae, and it's where the tail fan, there it is, comes out. And these animals don't have that. But she said that they did because she doesn't know what it is. So this part, I think, is actually influenced by Dr. Haynes. Using the evolutionary dinosaurian classification, which includes birds, is very problematic and represents an unnecessary ceding of ground to the evolutionary narrative, as well as a confusing narrative for the churchgoer. Again, only if the churchgoer is an idiot, which, again, I don't think most of them are. But here's the thing. If you don't like the evolutionary dinosaurian classification, give one yourselves. Yes, Skeletor over 9,000 says, fail tent. Yeah. I don't know if you can tell. I'm a little agitated by this whole thing. This is this is getting on my nerves a bit. But that's the thing they'll never do. They'll never give their own definition of dinosaur and then go ahead and show why birds don't meet it. And I think they don't do it because they know they can't. Because I think they know there is no version of sorry, I'll double check your pronunciation in just a second. I think they know there is no version of the dinosaur, of a definition for dinosaur that isn't special pleading that doesn't also include birds. I think that's why they don't do it. And being informed that the pronunciation is Jillienren. Okay. Is that a schwa? My display is really tiny and I can't tell if that's a schwa. I'm going to go with it's a schwa. Jillienren. So, sorry about that if I was getting that wrong, Jillienren. So yeah. Thank you for using the International Phonetic Alphabet. I really appreciate that. It is by far the preferred way to express correct pronunciation among all the other options. Let's see. Even when members of the evolutionary community question the idea that dinosaurs had feathers with sound peer-reviewed papers, which they don't, they do it with laughably bad peer-reviewed papers that are actually not really peer-reviewed anymore because their last good arguments were in like the late 90s. And now they had to publish in journals that don't actually normally publish paleontology stuff. It's the same thing that you see happen with like Mark Armitage, who published his paleontology findings in a in a microscopy journal, which means it was peer reviewed by their peer reviewers, who are mostly people who specialize in the proper use of microscopes. And here's the thing, right? Oh, Jillian Wren says I copy pasted it from a site just for you. Thank you. Was it the IPA keyboard site? That's what I use. I love that thing. I Google IPA keyboard. It's like the first or second link. Love that place. Anyway, so So yeah, that's what Lingam Soliar and Alan Fiducia and whatnot. Those are the only 2 bandit names I keep in my brain. I know there's like 4 or 5 others, but whatever. That's what they do. They do the same thing creationists do. They either retreat to real but off-topic peer-reviewed journals, or they publish internally, where there isn't real peer review. So, yeah. The only reason to do so is if some of the same assumptions that drive the evolutionary model are smuggled into the creation model, or, namely that some dinosaurs had feathers, or, you're just accepting the obvious physical evidence of things that are obviously not birds, but that obviously have feathers. And for what purpose? The purpose is to try to make creationism actually correspond to the actual physical evidence in the world, right? That's what Todd Wood and Matt McLean are doing. They're not so absolutely blinkered that they think that all the previous conclusions of young Earth creationism are correct, even in cases where contradictory conclusions don't actually violate any of the basic assumptions of young Earth creationism. So they're trying to make young Earth creationism slightly less dumb. I mean, it's still dumb by several orders of magnitude, but they're trying to fix it by 0.5% or so, which is something. And for what purpose? If the assumption that some dinosaurs had feathers is removed, not an assumption, it's a conclusion, the entire evolutionary argument falls away. Nope, it doesn't, because you still have all the skeletal and the vascular and the respiratory similarities. And by respiratory, I mean, we know that many dinosaurs, like Majungasaurus and other theropods that aren't birds, had the avian-style respiration, with the numerous air sacs located throughout the torso and into the limbs. We know that. That's not a thing we have to guess at anymore. We found unambiguous scarring that is correlated directly with the same scarring found in birds that is where those air sacs are. We even know that sauropods had similar air sacs, at least in their neck vertebrae, cervical vertebrae. Savage Cobra said, how many millihovens are we at now? I don't know. I feel like we're at least at 750. Maybe somewhere around the 750 range for millihovens. As does the so the entire evolutionary argument falls away, as does the young Earth evolution argument dependent on it, which it's not dependent on any assumptions other than that fossils represent the remains of organisms. Dinosaurs had no feathers. They really did, though. And claiming they did actually requires reliance on evolutionary interpretations of the fossils. It should not be accepted by creation. It doesn't, though. That's the thing. So let's see what else they recommend. Are dragons real? Of course, their answer is going to be yes. Did mammals live alongside the, quote, earliest dinosaurs? Well, it depends on what you mean by mammals, but broadly speaking, yes. Dino socks? I want to check out what that actually says, because I don't know what that means. Do birds have lizard legs? No. No, because they're dinosaurs, not lizards. That's dumb. For one thing, lizards are generally plantigrade, like bears. And dinosaurs are digitigrade, like dinosaurs, but also I don't know, dogs. I just want to see what's in there. Several previous shows addressed this misconception. Did dinosaurs turn into birds? By Dr. David Menton. Oh, goodness. Dinosaurs and Birds Clothing by Dr. Gabriella Haynes. Dino socks. After all, don't scales seen on birds' feet and legs serve as proof that they evolved from some reptilian ancestor? Not on their own. Alright, so they're just talking about the integumentary system. I don't know why this is doing this. Alright, well guys, I just wanted to check out what that whole idea was about, because dinosaur socks didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but basically they're just complaining about the fact that birds have scaly feet and how that totally doesn't mean anything for dinosaurs. Except here's the problem, right? Dinosaurs with scales have the reticulate scales of bird feet. Scales like these. They don't have the morphologically distinct scales of squamates, nor do they have the, again, morphologically distinct scutes of crocodilians. So, yeah, it's a bit of a problem. These feet are more like dinosaur feet than these feet are. A lot more. A lot more. Including not just the skin, but also, the ankles, the shape of the digits, the digit count, the number of digits. It's... Everything about bird feet is far more like a dinosaur foot than it is like a lizard foot. And lizard feet are far less like bird feet than are basically any dinosaur feet. It's almost ludicrous the degree to which they can get this wrong. Anyway, so Grady Dalton says, don't those scales also become feathers with certain mutations? Crocodilian scutes can actually be induced to form feather-like hollow filaments in embryo when given certain hormones that mimic the developmental signaling that occurs in birds for feathers. So, yeah. Well, guys, we're actually going to be wrapping it up here. This was not really intended to be a full 2-hour length thing. We've been going for about an hour 20. So I'm going to remind people what's coming up in case you're watching live or soon after. On Tuesday, we have Kent with Bent. I believe it's 105. On Thursday, we're going to be starting a new series where we look at amazing animals and how apparently, according to the creationists over at ICR, they indicate obvious design. And we're also going to talk about why, one, yes, those animals are amazing and awesome and cool, and two, why, no, that does not imply design. On the 18th, we're doing the Cambrian Bunny Awards. Now, that's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern, which is 6 Pacific, 7 my time. So it will not be at the regular time for a Saturday stream. Then, ideally, on the 21st, we're going to be doing the Matt with Maddie. On the 22nd, on Top Hats Off, I should be doing the second part of the 2-parter episode of Power Rangers Jungle Beasts. On Top Hats Off, that's the actual play RPG game that I run every other Wednesday, ideally. And then I don't know what's up on the 25th. Maybe we'll have Catholic Creationism Part 3. So there you go. Ifesize says last year I had owl sounds. The quality went down this year. I don't remember having owl sounds last time. Maybe I did. Actually, I don't remember having a superb owl special last year. So, everybody, thank you so much for coming to this. I really appreciate it. I ran this as, yes, partly counter-programming for, the big game. That's why the pun is there, the superb owl. I think you can figure out the pun on your own. If you can't, I don't know, ask some Americans. And with that, I am going to leave you with the end credits, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the weekend, a wonderful rest of the week, and I hope that I see all of you on Tuesday for Kent with Bent. Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Work in Progress, Bent Hovend, Tapioca Weasel, Denny5252, Ian Chen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, San, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, Elleran Teller, Dr. Tapioca Weasel, and Pat L. Dennis. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.